Alright, everyone settle in because today we're diving deep, and I mean asterisk, really asterisk deep, into one of the most baffling mysteries I've ever come across. It all started with a single cryptic email sent to my research account. The sender was anonymous, but the contents were explosive. It was a partial journal, supposedly written by a mountaineer named Daniel, detailing his final expedition in the Himalayas. Now, normally I dismiss something like this as a hoax, but there were details, specific coordinates, and a photograph that I couldn't ignore. The photo showed a cave entrance, unremarkable at first glance, but inside, just barely visible, was a faint, warm glow. The journal entry attached was dated just 3 days before Daniel was officially declared missing. It read, "The air hums. The stone is warm. I have to know what's inside." So I did what any of you would do. I booked a flight. Getting to the coordinates was an ordeal in itself. It was a remote, almost inaccessible region of the Himalayas, far from any established climbing routes. After days of trekking, guided only by Daniel's last known GPS data and that one haunting photograph, my team and I found it, a fissure in a sheer rock face, almost perfectly hidden. And just like the photo showed, a soft, inviting golden light pulsed from within. The air around the entrance was strangely warm, a stark contrast to the biting cold of the high altitude. It felt alive. The locals I had hired refused to go any further. They spoke of ancient legends, of a doorway that swallows souls, a place forbidden by their ancestors. But Daniel's journal was burning a hole in my pocket. He went in, and I had to follow. The moment I stepped through the glowing threshold, everything changed. The wind, the cold, the world outside just vanished. One step and I was plunged into absolute silent darkness. It was disorienting, suffocating. I fumbled for my headlamp, my fingers shaking, but before I could switch it on, a low hum started, vibrating through the very rock beneath my feet, and then light. But not from my lamp. Slowly, one by one, massive crystals embedded in the ceiling of a cavern began to glow, illuminating the space around me. And my jaw hit the floor. This wasn't a cave, it was a city. A vast, sprawling underground metropolis. Buildings, for lack of a better word, stretched as far as the eye could see, their architecture unlike anything from human history. They were carved from the living rock, seamless and ancient, with spiraling towers that reached up towards the glowing crystal ceiling hundreds of feet above. I was standing on a wide paved causeway, looking down into a city that shouldn't exist. It was utterly silent save for that persistent low hum that seemed to emanate from the crystals themselves, bathing everything in a soft, natural-looking daylight. The scale was impossible to comprehend. This was a civilization that had mastered geology, engineering, and light, all hidden beneath the world's tallest mountains. The buildings were clearly abandoned. A thick layer of dust covered everything, and a sense of profound stillness hung in the air. This place had been empty for a very, very long time. Thousands of years? Millions? The architecture felt alien, organic, almost grown rather than built. There were no sharp corners, only flowing, graceful curves. It was beautiful and deeply unsettling. Who built this? And where did they go? I felt an overwhelming sense of being an intruder in a sacred, forgotten place. As I began to walk through the empty streets, the sheer age of the city became even more apparent. Some structures had partially collapsed, revealing intricate inner chambers and passageways. But there was no rubble, no debris. It was as if the stone itself had simply eroded with time in a clean, unnatural way. I ran my hand along one of a building's walls. It was smooth, like polished marble, and still faintly warm to the touch. Carved into the surface were symbols, intricate geometric patterns that swirled and interlocked. My heart skipped a beat. I recognized them. They were the exact same symbols that had been faintly etched around the glowing doorway I passed through. This wasn't just a random city. It was directly connected to the entrance. It was a lock and key. The symbols were clearly a language, but one that bore no resemblance to any known human script, ancient or modern. That humming sound was everywhere, a constant, omnipresent vibration. It wasn't just auditory. I could feel it in my bones, a resonant frequency that was both calming and deeply strange. It seemed to be the city's lifeblood, the power source for the crystal lights. As I ventured deeper, I found open plazas, grand amphitheaters, and structures that could only be described as temples, all built on a scale that dwarfed human ambition. The city was designed for beings much larger than us, or perhaps for a population of many millions. And still, there was no sign of life. No bones, no artifacts, no tools. Just the city itself, a silent testament to its lost creators. The dust was the only evidence that time had passed here. And in that dust, I saw something that made the hair on my arm stand up. Footprints. And they weren't mine. They were faint, partially obscured by newer layers of dust, but they were unmistakably there. Several sets of tracks, made by standard-issue hiking boots. Daniel, he had been here. He had walked these same silent streets. But as I followed his path, I noticed something else. His footprints were often overlapped by another set of tracks. These were different. They weren't shoe prints. They were long, slender, and had 3 distinct toe-like impressions. They were not human. My sense of wonder was instantly replaced by a primal fear. Daniel wasn't alone down here. And neither was I. The humming seemed to grow louder, more intense, as if the city itself was waking up. I followed the mixed tracks through a labyrinth of winding streets, my hand resting on the emergency flare in my pack. The path led me to one of the largest central structures, a colossal dome that pulsed with a slightly brighter light than the rest. The tracks led directly inside. Taking a deep breath, I entered a vast circular chamber. In the center of the room was a dais, and on it, a collection of objects that didn't belong. A modern climbing axe, a tattered backpack, a water bottle, and a leather-bound journal. It was Daniel's. He had made it this far. I rushed forward and picked it up, my hands trembling as I flipped through the pages. His handwriting grew more and more erratic as the entries went on. He wrote about the city, the symbols, the constant hum. He felt he was being watched. He described a growing sense of understanding, that the symbols weren't just writing, but schematics, star charts, history. The final entry was scrawled hastily, the pen having dug deep into the paper. It said, "They are not gone. They are waiting. They are not ghosts. The door doesn't just let you in. It calls you." As I read those final words, a cold dread washed over me. I finally understood. The warmth, the glow, the hum, it was all a lure, a beacon. We weren't explorers who found this place by accident. We were summoned. The city chose us. I looked around the empty chamber, my senses on high alert. The silence was suddenly heavier, more menacing than before. That's when I heard it. Not the humming, but a soft, shuffling sound from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. The sound of footsteps. The same non-human footsteps I had seen in the dust. They were slow, deliberate, and getting closer. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest, staring into the darkness where the sound was coming from. A shape began to resolve itself from the shadows. Tall, slender, its form barely discernible in the dim light. I couldn't see a face, only a silhouette. And then, a voice, a soft whisper that seemed to echo not in the chamber but directly inside my mind. It was ancient, patient, and utterly terrifying. It said, "We've been waiting for you. What happens next?" Honestly, I don't know. This footage was recovered from a memory card found near the cave entrance weeks later. The camera was damaged, but the card was intact. I'm just the one who put it all together. What were those beings? Where is Daniel? And who was the next person they were waiting for? Maybe some mysteries are best left unsolved. Make sure you subscribe, because the investigation into the warm door is far from over. Thanks for watching.